Today from the Co-op Federation, and I am welcoming the wonderful Rebel Black.
Hi, Molly.
Hi, Rebel. Thanks so much for coming along and doing a little interview.
You're welcome.
Rebel is from the Rural Woman Cooperative, which is a fantastic new cooperative which has just become a co-op. I would love to hand straight over to you, Rebel, and maybe talk a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to start the Rural Woman.
Yeah, well, the Rural Woman journey started, I guess, from when I was born, because I was born in a small country town and went through my schooling there, grew up on a farm in a little town east of a town called Coonabarabran. Tried uni, didn't like it, went to the Northern Territory, had a ball, decided I needed a career, found a job, ended up in Lightning Ridge as the editor of the newspaper in 21 years ago. And that's where I've been ever since. And so I guess the journey for me has always been around entrepreneurism and building businesses, because of course, when you live in a little town with a population of a question mark, as we are in Lightning Ridge, the opportunities for jobs are few and far between. So at the age of, I started my first business at age 22, and that had evolved into a number of different things. And then I took a couple of different jobs, and at age 30 reached the income and intellectual ceiling that my community could deliver to me in terms of career. So I had a difficult choice to make: leave or stay. And I tried the leave option, and I lasted 9 months in the real world, and came back to Lightning Ridge and started another business. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So the Rural Woman was really a brain awakening, 3 a.m. wake up call, where I just knew that I had to create a platform that would support rural women to reconnect to their most powerful voice, and then would also provide a platform where those voices would be amplified. And so I wrote out the entire business model, launched a website the next day, called for our first contributors, and some of those people are still members, lifetime members, and members of the co-op today. So that was in 2014. I took on a co-founder in July that year. That was like April. And then in July that year, my friend Phoebe Maroulis joined me. And for a year, we built the foundations of really what we know the Rural Woman to be today. And then we realized we were better friends and supporters as friends rather than business partners. And so we, separated the business, and I took back full control. But I always knew that it would be owned by the women it served. That was very clear in the beginning mission, when I was awake at 3 a.m. writing it all down. But I didn't know how to do that at the time. And what I did know was I didn't want to start a not-for-profit organization in the models that I had seen and worked with in my career. And so I just thought, well, it'll happen when it happens. And then co-ops kept niggling at me. I've seen correspondence in old Facebook messages to people in as early as 2015 and 2016 about co-ops, the Co-op Federation, seeing a speaker, at a conference talking about co-ops and having a yarn with someone locally about that as a model. And then in 2019, which is when you and I met, I did a platform cooperatives course through Mondragon University, and that really cemented for me that the co-op model was what we wanted to transition the Rural Woman enterprise into going forward. And we launched, became official in March this year. Had a really great incubation experience with Incubator Co-op and with our founding board members. Public, it became true in March. We got all the sign off from the registrar and all the documents came through, and then we just publicly launched only a week or 10 days ago into the real world, and got our first non-internal members coming on board, which is super exciting. So it's been a journey.
Oh, well, congratulations firstly on your formation, but also congrats on listening to that 3 a.m. wake up call. A lot of us have those and don't actually have the motivation to roll out of bed and say, no, this is treasure here. I'm going to follow it and see where it leads. So
Yeah. To be
wonderful.
honest with you, Molly, I couldn't ignore it. It literally was like it was a physical experience as well as a mental one, and I just knew I had to. I was like, something bad will happen if I don't. Was the sense that I got. It was like it wasn't. There was enthusiasm but there was an impulse behind that was undeniable, and I just couldn't do anything but that. So it's changed, and what we offer to the market has shifted and changed, and we add so much more value now than we did, and we charge the same that we did in 2014 when it was just me and Phoebe having a yarn once a month. We charge the same for that, and now women get access to 200 odd events every single year on subject matter expertise covering 4 different subject areas and planning and accountability. And so I feel proud that we've lasted this long, and I was so dedicated and committed that this was not going to fail despite my fears and the cash flow crises and thinking this is crazy and all of those things. I just could not ignore that impulse. So it's exciting that it's now 7 years old. The enterprise and the brand and everything that the Rural Woman stands for now is 7 years old. And so what the co-op has actually acquired in that transfer is an organization that has very strong roots, great brand recognition, and incredible products and services that now the co-op can just amplify.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. One of the reasons that I was really excited to have you chat to us in person was a lot of cooperatives find themselves in the position of having to explain to people what cooperatives are, because as amazing as the model is, we don't learn in high school or further education or uni or our MBAs what a co-op actually is. And so we end up being the default explainers for the structure. And I know you do a wonderful job of doing that. So for the sake of our members and potentially the outside world who are watching this, do you mind explaining in your words what a cooperative is to you?
Yeah, well, for me, having had businesses since I was in my early 20s, in a sole tradership, in a partnership, in a company, I've sort of experienced many different models of ownership of business and enterprise. I've worked with not-for-profits, both in an employment capacity and in consulting, and also as a president and leader of those organizations. The difference for me with co-ops is how the ownership is structured. So for me, it's the shareholdership that makes the difference in co-ops. So in an ordinary company, the more shares you hold, the more influence or ownership you are perceived to have, in the sense that you can have more votes. So it's one share, one vote. Whereas in cooperativism, it is, you can have many shares, but you still only have one vote. And so it's the way power is structured, to me, in the co-ops is what's really exciting. And what we're seeing with the women that are part of our community and those that are coming on board as early adopters members, is they want to own the entity. And that was very much a part of the impulse for me, was that I didn't want this model that saw me at the top of some company as the sole owner of the shareholdership and therefore the only voice that had any influence or power for ultimate decision making. And so a model that created that very flat type model, if you like, instead of a pyramid or triangle type model, was very important. And it is what co-ops bring when they're done well. Mm. There is the ability for co-ops to be manipulated in the same way that companies can be. And we see that, and so I think it's really, the other thing about cooperativism is really honouring the source impulse of what co-ops were there for, which was shared decision making, shared ownership, fair value, everybody has the same skin in the game, whether they bought in for $1 or $1 million. And the equity around that becomes a really important conversation and differential. And the women that are joining our co-op want the ownership. They want the responsibility of the, not always the seat at the table as a board member necessarily, but the opportunity for their voice to be heard. And I think that I get really excited about that. And I think, but you have to hold fiercely to the values of the co-op, because it is still a corruptible model.
Sure.
Where the intention is still for profit for a few, as opposed to profit and fair share for everyone.
Yeah. So lots of that member education about what a cooperative is, and I guess taking advantage of that buy-in, that higher level of buy-in that you get with people that feel like they're joint owners of a business or organization.
Yeah, there is skin in the game that's very different, you know, and it's also like what was interesting, Molly, is that, well, I always held the intention of the transfer. That wasn't always something I talked about in the early days, especially. But in some research that the University of New England did for us in 2019, 2020 on our virtual business incubator model, it showed very clearly that there was a very strong alignment to me as the business owner. People really liked me and appreciated the work I did. But there was a very strong misalignment with the structure, and that people felt uncomfortable with the model that saw me as the only owner. So that's probably a reflection of my own personal values being reflected back to me. But also it was a real indication from the market that my intention was right on track in terms of what they would then engage with. And we are seeing engagement now with the co-op as an enterprise that has, you know, those values in different markets that as a company we've never had engagement in before. And I think that's really exciting as well, particularly for the amplification of the voice of the rural woman, which is the real work that this enterprise kind of came to life for.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. There's so much interest in those more equitable business models. It's a renaissance of cooperatives, I feel, at the moment. We seem to be seeing.
I think so too, Molly. And I think women particularly are looking for other models. They're tired of the extractivism model of corporations and the law that sits around, you know, even the structures of companies and other things. And so even in the virtual business incubator, there was a lot of discussion from women around, how do I structure my business? You know, how do I get this right? Will I be a not-for-profit? You know, because even not-for-profit is a flawed model in the sense that it sets the enterprise up to not be profitable, which means it creates a dependence on forces and sources outside of itself, which is not sustainable or regenerative at all. So we have to really understand that the frameworks we operate in, the systems that we operate in currently, are not necessarily serving for where we want to head. And we're definitely seeing women in our communities really speaking to that and asking lots of questions about it, and actually following the work we're doing with a view to implement similar changes in their own enterprises down the track, which I find really exciting as well.
That is fantastic. And I love the way you really acknowledge women's, especially rural women, in community as a source that gets extracted, and you're really encouraging women to reclaim some of that power and autonomy and actually ask for something back from what they put into community. So you're doing wonderful things.
Thanks, Molly.
Pleasure. Well, thanks for being here. I'd like to give people a really clear vision of what it looks like what the rural woman looks like in practice, so people can get their heads around it. And you've described it as a virtual business incubator. Is that what you would call the rural woman now?
That's one of the things we do, I guess. It's one of the products that we have in the market. I guess first and foremost, the Rural Woman's ethos is for the advancement of rural women and girls, and that we do that in many domains. So we're looking to support rural women to reclaim agency in their financial life, in their well-being, in their business, in their careers, in their contribution. And so we look to say, I feel like the difference between us and other advocacy bodies that are advocating in, for the same kind of community that we are, is that we are firmly fixed in a visionary space and leading innovation. And we're saying, so we're always looking to the future and saying, what will the women in our community need and need to be ready for? And let's build, spaces where they can engage in that, whether it's through education, the digital environment, whether it's in the kind of businesses that we collaborate and partner with, or the kind of enterprises that we morph and develop on behalf of our members, or that we work with our members to invest in. We are always looking to see where the needs will be, as well as working to address the needs now. So we have a number of different products in market. We have what we call our Bloom Continuing Personal and Professional Development Program, which is a continuous education week after week after week, every week of the year since 2014, that rural women can show up for. And so we have members that are part of that cohort of people, and we teach in streams at the moment in wellbeing, leadership and human skills, regenerative agriculture, and business and digital technology. Those are all events, masterclasses, group coaching, hosted by subject matter experts who are rural women as well, so they have that contextual appropriateness. We also do work with businesses and corporations in their learning and development, and in their talent development space, so where they're wanting to provide ongoing support for rural women. We're developing offerings in the gender intelligence space and looking at how we engage better in the conversation around gender diversity and the intelligence that sits in that. We have a digital platform that is also a networking space for rural women. And through the co-op, we also have a video-based platform that we're partnered with a startup out of the University of New South Wales called Kindle, which is a video-based networking platform that we've been working with for the last 2 years. I saw their work and we had to be part of what they were doing, and that was us supporting innovation in the way that we could, and we're now one of their customers. So we are really looking to the cutting edge, and we want to partner and collaborate with other businesses and enterprises and corporations and government who want that too, who want, we're ahead of the game in many places. And so we want to work with organizations who want to be at the leading edge of development for human potential and for the advancement of rural women and girls.
Amazing. Thanks, Rebel. I see through a list of questions. Did any of those jump out as things you would love to talk about? One on my list that before you go is to tell me your top of the mountain absolute magic moment so far in your journey with rural. Well, I really struggle with that word.
It's a terrible word to say, rural.
I go for the drawl, rural.
I sound like I have a lisp every time I say it. Rural, you've got to really think about it. So I had a top of the moment experience well before the Rural Woman existed that reminded me, I was actually literally on top of a mountain that I had just really struggled hard to get to the top of, and had to ask for a lot of help, which was very uncomfortable for me at that point in my life. And we got to the top of this mountain, and what I was expecting after that struggle of the climb was to feel a sense of relief because we were at the top. And instead, what I realized was there are more bloody mountains to climb. And so I feel like in that moment, I was reminded that this is a journey. And so the Rural Woman, THE, stands for Thriving, Healing and Evolving. And that very much came from that place, was that we're never done. Like, we're never done with this work. This work is forever. And as soon as we surrender this idea that we will make it somewhere or to some place, and then we'll be, whatever we think we're going to be, enlightened, empowered, etc., we are delusional in that thinking. And so for me, the having thriving, healing, and evolving imbued as our mission and very much at the core of everything we do, our decisions, etc., as an organization, comes from a very real, very pragmatic top of the mountain experience. But in terms of peak experiences of this journey, it has been the co-creation of the co-op with my fellow board members and the team of the Rural Woman and the community that we serve. We did 3 amazing strategic planning sessions. We had nearly 40 people show up. Some of them were members, some of them had just come because they wanted to participate, and they'd never been in the community before. And so that's been an extraordinary process, as well as the work that we did, you know, with our board in even getting to the point where the co-op could be registered. It wasn't one moment, but it's been accumulation of many generous contributions, smart people offering their wisdom, bringing it together, challenging our thinking, having what I thought was going to be true be completely obliterated in that process, and being, you know, and learning to be okay with that. You know, it's a beautiful journey, and it is business is the best personal development work you will ever do, the greatest spiritual journey you could ever undertake. And selling your company to a co-op that you also founded is also a deeply transformative experience. And I've been, you know, brought to my edges many times, but because I've surrendered to the process and to the great people that are in my life, it's been so easy and a joy to be a part of. And I am just, honestly, I'm so excited for what's coming, because the momentum behind this is very palpable now. And I think the next 2 to 3 years for the co-op is going to be pretty mind-blowing.
Wonderful. The group work is really amazing, isn't it? When you start doing big participatory work and there's a struggle and you're seeing things from other people's point of view, having to take on their opinions, you're changing your mind about what you thought your opinion was, and then you finally come to an outcome, and it feels so good.
Yeah, and it is difficult. You want to hold, you know, and because I'm the steward of this, you know, I feel that real sense of stewardship over the idea that came to me and was born through me. But stewardship does not mean ownership. And I think that's the difference, is separating you from it. You are not the same. And so it's been a real, this is a separation process, which we're practically going through now, you know, domain names and business names and the transfer of credit cards from one, you know, enterprise to the other, and all the things that is the tangible reality. But you've also, you know, I was really fiercely held to that this would be a global community, but our strategic planning said, no, we are a global community inside an Australian geography. And I was like, but, you know, I really wanted to be like, no. And then I just was like, actually, you're right. You know, we got to do the work inside first. All the answers lie within. That's one of our values. That's one of the things we speak to. Then we've got work to do in Australia first before we even think about going global, which is a very noble thing to come to. And I feel amazed that we have such a self-responsible, reflective, extraordinary community that would hold fiercely to that too, you know?
Yeah.
Very
and
cool.
Feel a sense of ownership as well. Like there's so much to be learned from what you're saying about stepping back from your particular vision of how it was going to be, to give other people ownership, and for longevity as well, so it can continue on beyond you and be really owned and held by the people that will hold it in 50 years or 100 years.
Well, yeah, and the truth is, Molly, I don't have the energy for I am a starter of things. That is my natural impulse. So to hold something for even the 7 years that I've held it for is 3 times longer than I normally do. So, but I knew I had to, you know, I had to break through my own personal barriers and stories about that as well. But I genuinely am not operating in my zone of genius in the phase that the co-op needs to grow to. So my choices were, as a business, and you know, as a business owner, my choices were sell it, close it, or do this, you know, create a community exit. And so I've sold things before and that hasn't worked out. I've given businesses away. That definitely doesn't work out. I've shut them down. That doesn't work out for me. And so it's like, well, we've got to try something different. And the idea, I could see this as a model for me as an enterprise developer for I can see more co-ops in my future. Put it that way. So I think it's or community exits as a, you know, because
create a community exit. You're going to create a whole nother breed of entrepreneurial.
Yeah, it is. It is a community exit. I mean, we're already working on the next one for me at a local level at working out how do we build community wealth. Through shared ownership and different models instead of, you know, ownership by one big rich investor who comes in and just buys up the lot. And what does that mean for businesses who can't sell in small towns? What's the legacy and what other entities could we create that might actually help us solve their problem in the short term and build community wealth in the long term? I mean, like this process is like, my mind is so open. I'm so excited. The more I learn, the more I can see it plays into different things and visions that I've had a long time. So yeah, like I'm all in with co-ops. I'm all in with the model as long as you stay true to the model. And even in our last strategic session we just had with our board and team, I said that we cannot become the institutions that we were built to be different to. Like we just have to hold so fiercely and firmly to fair share, you know, to everyone's voices, you know, to diversity and inclusion. And we have to hold ourselves to a very high standard and accountability on that.
Oh, it's great to know you're in there at the helm, making sure that happens. And isn't it exciting of going sideways, but with all of the platform co-op, you know, stuff that's happening. I just noticed one of our member co-ops, the Village Project, which is a great mob of people transforming a space in Summerhill and Sydney. And there's Beehive Bendigo, which is a platform cooperative in Bendigo. And they're both doing sharing apps at the moment. So that real embedding wealth in the community, a replacement Facebook, a more equitable Facebook for those informal sharing networks that are already happening, but keeping the wealth in the community and the data.
Yes, well, because that's one of the things we learned in that very first course, wasn't it, around the value of data that I had never really thought about.
Yeah.
But that is one of the big value propositions of co-ops or of any business, whether you leverage or monetize it or not. But that when it's a company, it's owned by your data is owned by the company. When it's a co-op, it's owned by everyone. So the decisions around that become very, very different. And yeah, like that for me was a really big mind opener as well around the opportunities that exist when you own your own data and what you can do with that to leverage other things is really exciting. And, you know, like Molly, when we asked our community what they wanted us to invest our profit in, it was things like housing for women in rural communities. And it was, you know, a bank, an airline, I think came up, you know, let's own a rural women owned airline. Like we always having trouble keeping airlines in the, you know, in our communities. So they were dreaming way bigger than me, which I think is such a brilliant thing about that more democratic process where you know, what's it called? There's an organization in Australia called New Democracy Australia, I believe, and they run a process that's so beautifully, almost like a jury, you know, to bring diverse voices to a table. They're paid, they're valued. If they come up with amazing ideas, whoever's got them there to the table commits to it. You know, it's true democracy. And I really feel like we have to be that change if we're ever going to see that change at a big systemic level within our governance structure in Australia in the future.
Yeah, I do feel like we are reclaiming democracy at the moment, and that's something that cooperatives, I feel like this has become a massive co-ops plug, do is they teach democracy, because other than, you know, once every 4 years when you go to the ballot box, we're not really in a practice of engaging in democracy in our everyday lives. So it really grows those tools, I think.
Yeah, and technology is a great enabler, Molly, which we've seen through the pandemic, of course, now that everyone, you know, knows how to use technology that's been around for a long time, but people weren't using it as well as it could have been. But the blockchain technology and the other things I think can be harnessed for incredible democratic processes and engagement and gamification that we understand. If we turned our understanding of human psychology and the technology and engaged people in democracy using the tools we already know, what an extraordinary possibility we have for people's real voices to be heard in the decision-making process.
Yeah.
And for money flow, that's the other thing, is the revolution to wealth, which is what the RW also stands for me, was a big part of the motivation of ownership for rural women. And while we're a non-distributing cooperative, I do think we can create distributive arms that will enable, the flow of wealth to come back into our people's, women's hands and communities' hands as well. But even the flow of money out of communities, local communities as well as our global community, is so interesting that if you could measure that and analyze that with blockchain technology, then maybe the extractivism could end and we could actually see a more regenerative approach for little towns like where I live, where big dollars go out all the time in school fees and big appliance purchases and et cetera, and we never see that money. That money doesn't come back. It leaves. And so the circular economy becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. But the technology we have and new models of ownership, I think the two blended together become this extraordinary opportunity. So very cool.
Very cool. If people are watching this and they are loving what you're saying and they would love to support the rural woman, is there anything, what would you suggest? How would you like people to participate or support you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So if you're a rural woman or you identify as a rural woman, I would invite you to come and join us in our platform called community.theruralwoman.com. It's where over 700 rural women are gathering, learning, sharing, networking, connecting, solving their problems, reaching their aspirations and goals, and supporting each other to do that. And we would also obviously invite people to become members of the co-op, which you can do by just going to theruralwoman.com and finding one of the Join Us buttons. And that will take you to our membership page. You can read all about it. It's $99 a year. It is open for men, women, urban, rural. We have made the membership of the co-op open for all, but the platform, we are maintaining the integrity of that as just for rural women at this stage. But we would, if you are for the advancement of rural women and girls and you believe in the work that we're doing and you want to support us, then become a member of the co-op. We'd love that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Rebel.
You're welcome, Molly. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Pleasure, always. All right, see ya.
May you bloom where you are.
Thanks.